No issue. Okay. So the presentation is quite general. It's nothing gonna be just so much, boring technical stuff, but the fun stuff with this, because for me, this aquaculture, this offshore aquaculture engineering is something that is quite interesting. I've been working on this, as my colleague said, for a while, and I'm gonna explain you why. I strongly recommend that if you have some questions, because it's gonna be a long talk, just put it on the chat, and at the end of the presentation, we can discuss them. And as he said, my name is Cristian Cifuentes. I work at Universidad Austral de Chile in the south of Chile. Now here it's around 8 a.m. in the morning, so that gives you an idea of how far apart we are. So uh, who am I? Here is I have a bachelor's degree in naval architecture from Universidad Austral, and then I had the opportunity to go to the States and do my PhD in ocean engineering, which is something that I strongly recommend to every one of you if you want to pursue a career in the future. It's always good to first, take a step back before going into industry, doing a master's or a PhD in a different place, in a place far away from your country, because that's going to give you opportunity to meet people, and then you're going to be, giving this kind of lectures all over the place. Today, I'm an assistant professor here at Universidad Austral, and I am the head of we have a graduate program in naval architecture and ocean engineering, and I'm going to show you a lot of the work that we've been doing in that project for the last 5 years, where the project has been running on. So at some point you wanna go take an adventure, you are welcome to come here and be a grad student here at WACH. And also the last one is the thing that I do for fun, trying to get away from the numbers of the engineering. I am a avid runner, and that's a picture of one of the races that I've done here in Chile. It's one of the things that I really like, that I picked when I was in the States. That's just a big picture of who I am. And now get into the outline of the presentation. Why aquaculture is something that, as naval architects and ocean engineers, we should care about it. I'm going to show you some numbers, I'm going to show you some figures, and you will probably understand if you haven't already talked about it. I'm going to show you aquaculture in Chile.
Dia kayaknya lagi apa dah? Lagi
Oh,
wish night kalau nggak salah.
I think some of the.
okay.
Aku nggak ikut.
Oh, hold on.
Okay.
Maybe Reynard and Martin can help to mute the participants that's unmuted.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to show you why Chile is it's so interested in aquaculture, and why it's an important player around the world. Even though it's a small country, you'll see how relevant this industry is for us. I'm going to show you some projects of offshore aquaculture in Chile, what we call offshore aquaculture. I'm going to show you some offshore and exposed aquaculture around the world, and of course, show you the future trends and challenges in this topic. So why aquaculture? Why do we care about aquaculture? Why it's so important? It's becoming more and more important. You have to think that aquaculture as itself, when we talk about aquaculture, the definition is basically the cultivation of marine species under a controlled environment. We're talking about fish, we're talking about mollusks, we're talking about today algae in the water, kelp, we're talking about different species. And this is something that's been going on in different places all over the world, but it's a new industry. It doesn't have more than 20 or 30 years at most. Here in Chile, we started at the beginning of the 90s. In Norway, they started a little bit earlier, in the middle of the 80s. But in other places all over in the world, it's a new industry. For example, in the States, it's a new industry. In Canada, it's been 10 years. In Greece, it's going to be 15 years old. So why do we care about aquaculture? Well, these are the pictures that I like to show everyone that I talked about this topic. As you see in the picture in the left, you're gonna see this light blue here. up to this point, up to the middle of the graph, basically what you have is the wild caught fish. So this is traditional fisheries. And you can see that since the 90s, this line is basically a flat line. So we know that we have depleted the ocean from fish. So basically now the line is getting flat and probably it's going to go down in the future. But on the other side, aquaculture is growing. As you see in these red and light red colors here at the top of the graph, you see that aquaculture is actually growing, and the tendency of the growth here, particularly for uh, inland waters, which means interior fjords or channels, is growing really, really fast. And this is the number from FAO, the United Nations data. Up to 2020, we don't have new data. We have a new report this year, but they didn't upload this, upgrade the numbers. But we know that it's a trend that is growing and growing and growing and growing. And one of the consequences, for example, of the pandemic was people being at home. They started to realize how important the consumption of fish, for example, is. And after 2020, actually, the slope of this curve actually increases. So we have a big spike here during the pandemic on the consumption of all products from the ocean because it's a better, it's a better source of protein for your body, and people started consuming a lot more seaweed in Asia. Here in South America, we started consuming a lot more fish, and so on. So as you see here on the right, this is data from DNB in 2024. And what you see here is in this pie chart, the total amount of produce that we have from aquaculture in the world. We're talking about 114 metric millions of tons of products. And from that, you have finfish, you have crustacean, mollusks, seaweeds, and then you have all of these in gray are inland waters. That means a protected area. And then you have marine waters or open areas in the ocean. And then you have a lot of seaweed, and this is basically because of Asia. You're talking about China, South Korea, Japan. But then here, finfish, the big player here is without a doubt China. And then in the salmon area, in the salmon part of this, you have smaller countries. So for example, this is the production of 2015. This is another pie chart from DNB. And as you see here, the total volume at that time was 106 million tons. So in less than 10 years, we have an increase of almost 30% of production. But what is interesting here is that in finfish, the pie chart is similar to the one before. In this area, we have the big players here, and you have China, Norway, and Chile. And this is something that really, really gives me big pride, because in anything today, to be larger than China in production, it's something, it's quite interesting, particularly for a country that has no more than 20 million people. That's the population of Chile. So if you are a larger producer than China, it means that you're doing something right. So that's why in Chile, aquaculture is so relevant, because we are the second largest producer in the world of salmon, just behind Norway, which is another small country, but we share one common area. In Norway, they have a lot of fjords that are these small, the portions of water that are protected by land. Here in the south of Chile, we have channels. And in both areas in the world, we have really cold water, because we get water. Norway gets water from the Nordic Pole, for the North Pole, and here in Chile we have water from Antarctica. That's cold water, full of nutrients, full of good stuff for the fish. So in those both, because we are cold nations, we are so close to the extremes of the world, we have really good resources for the production of salmon, which is something that loves cold water and fresh water from the poles. So here, the second, even though salmon is so important here in Chile, our main export is everything related to the mining. We are largest producer in the world of copper. So everyone buys copper from us. If you have some stuff in your house, probably like the cables on the streets and everything, at some point, some of those cables made of copper are gonna be made out of something that was at some point here in Chile. And the second largest export that we have is salmon. It's incredible the amount of salmon that we produce. Actually, in Chile, we have more flights to the US for salmon than for people because we are so few. There are not that many people traveling to the States every week. We have more than 20 flights to the United States every week full of salmon. And for people, probably you're going to have 7 flights, direct flights. So that's something quite particular to my country. Here it's what's going to happen in the future because what I show you is what has been happening up to now. But this is what people expect in the future. So you see here the production in the world people are expecting, and this is also data from DNB. And usually when you think about DNB, you think about vessels, you think about offshore structure, you think about now to floating wind turbine or wind turbines. But now these big players, DNB, ABS, all of these classification societies, are working towards offshore aquaculture because they know that it's the future trend. It's a new player in the offshore sector. So here we have, for example, and up to 2018, the capture fish was up to, around 80 tons. Now at this point, we have just 29 million tons of fish. But now the projection is that at 2050, we're going to have the same share for aquaculture fish and for capture fish. And here you see the proportions of what's going to happen in the future. And this is something really important because people have been talking about offshore aquaculture for quite a while. But offshore aquaculture is a big, big step forward. It's not really simple to move the structures that we have now in fjords or channels and put it in open ocean. So the projection is that in these sheltered areas, channels and fjords, the production is going to increase up to 2050 in this sense. And then offshore aquaculture is going to be just a small portion. It's going to grow, as you see here in the, let me show you here. I'm going to put the pen. As you see in this area, this particular area here is the offshore aquaculture. As you see, you don't see a big share of the market in offshore aquaculture. And I'm going to explain you why. But the inland the shelter production, which means channels and these protected fjords, it's going to keep growing. And then onshore aquaculture, which is another technology that I'm going to show you, is also it's going to have a share. So you're going to be, one thing that we have to be careful, and I'm going to tell you just now, is offshore aquaculture is a big goal, but putting something in the water is quite complex, especially once you have fish in the water. It's not that simple as people may think. So why aquaculture? The big question, because the United Nations, they have these 17 goals for the future, the goals to sustainable development. And when you see aquaculture, people have already identified that from this chart, we have at least all of these red boxes that I put here. So aquaculture tackles the zero hunger policy, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work, industry innovation, infrastructure, sustainable cities, etc., etc. So somehow aquaculture tackles many, many of these goals, sustainable development goals. So that's why aquaculture is so important because it impacts communities, it impacts the economy, but also it has a lot of impact on the environment. So we need to be careful on how we carry out our, business in the water at the end of the day. And during the last years, there is this new concept, the concept of the blue economy. And the concept of blue economy has many different definitions. That's why I put it here 3 of the ones that I like. For example, the World Bank said that the blue economy is basically a sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improve livelihoods and jobs while preserving the health of ocean ecosystem. This is the definition that I really like because it touches all the points that we have to take into account in this. The European Commission defines that all economic activities related to ocean, seas, and coast and covers a wide range of interlinked, established, and emerging sectors. And finally, the Commonwealth of Nations considered it an emerging concept which encourages better stewardship of our ocean or blue resources. Here is something quite important because when you think about, for example, oil and gas, usually oil and gas platforms, when they are in the water, they don't have to live with other users. I mean, at most you have the fishing vessels around them, but some of them are so far away that basically they are the only neighbor, the only people living in that neighbor. But when you talk about the aquaculture, usually you are using spaces that are used for multiple users. So you're going to have tourism in one area, you're going to have aquaculture, you're probably going to have the path of vessels that are going to a port. So aquaculture probably is going to be in areas, offshore aquaculture is going to be in areas, in between the oil and gas production and the coast. And in those areas, you have multiple players. So you're going to have to design your systems thinking about this multi-use of a space. So it gets more complicated, and you're going to have to take into account a lot more points than if you go really far away from the coast. So I'm going to show you the things that we do here at Universidad Austral because our things, since salmon farming is so important for our country, the work that we do at UH, it's heavily focused on this industry. And we do some particular things that I think probably some of them you haven't seen. And that's why I'm going to show you that. And the question that somebody asked me at the beginning was, so where in the world are you? Well, I couldn't take a single snapshot of Google Earth to show how far apart we are. So basically, I'm here in the south of South America. So you have Chile, this long, long country. And the shortest route to where you are somehow is 2 days and 8 hours by plane. So that was the shortest route that I could find. And then you see here is Chile, here where you are here somewhere. Here is Australia, and then this is where you are this morning. So yes, we are pretty far apart. But something that is interesting is that if you see, the how south we are, basically we are in a line. So we're not that far from so the weather probably is not that different, and there are a lot of similarities here. But as you see, Universidad Austral de Chile is really, really far away. So here is it's our city. We have around 200,000 people here. And we are at 40 South. We have 3 universities in this small town. It's a really well known place for the research and development institute that we have here at the Universidad Austral. Since we are close to Antarctica, we have one of the largest research institutions for Antarctic science here in Valdivia. That's why we have all of these centers, SEX, Infor, Blue Whale, and then we have NGOs like WWF, etc. Because Chile, in particular the south of Chile, is like a natural reserve. Everywhere that you go, you're gonna have natural parks. You're gonna have particular species. We have Antarctica. We have Easter Island, so it's a quite particular place. We have a small and medium-sized shipyards here. Naval architecture, the ocean engineering is one of the main activities that we have. And as said at the bottom, it has an excellent life quality. A lot of people here in Chile and in South America come to Valdivia in the summer to enjoy the landscapes. But we have, as he said there, yeah, that's true, 2.5 meters of rainfall a year. So it's a lot of rain, but that's why it's green everywhere. And this is how it looks like. So we have the only river where you can navigate here in Chile. We are located around the river. We have the bridges here. It's quite beautiful, and you see just a short drive, 20-minute drive, and you are in the Pacific Ocean. And when I'm talking about, this is Valdivia. This is the place where the university is located, and this is where I am right now in my house. So in the middle of nowhere. But Starlink today allows us to talk. And this is how it looks like in the infrastructure that we have for ships. So this is a big, this is the largest private shipyard in Chile, and it's a really cool place to work. And in the university we have a close relationship with them. You see there, they are really specialized in boats or vessels for aquaculture, and also for the cruise ships that we have here in Antarctica and in the south of Chile. So these are small cruise ships, really exclusive stuff, and they have built a ton of them. It's a shipyard that also have built for Maersk and for other companies internationally. And here you see some particulars of this shipyard and the industry here in the south. What we have here is a live fish carrier where you have to transfer salmon from the fish farm to the area where you're going to process the food, the fish. You have to transfer them alive. And this is one of the vessels that they have built. And they have built more than 20 vessels of this type. It's the shipyard in the world to build your wellboat. That's the name. And also, since we have a small river, we have this sort of taxis. So here in Valdivia, if you want to take a taxi by the water, you can do it. So we have these small vessels here powered by solar panels. And it's gonna cost you like half a dollar, and you can take a taxi by the river, which is really, really cool. Also designed by one Chilean company, built here in Valdivia. It's a really nice project, and it has a lot of recognitions in the country and abroad. Universidad Austral is basically covers all the south of Chile. We have 4 locations in Valdivia, Puerto Montt, and Coyhaique. So Valdivia is a northern place. Then you have Puerto Montt, Coyhaique is south here. We have around 13K students, 50-degree program. Postgraduate program is one of the top 5 universities in Chile, and we have something around 70 years of tradition. And this is the area, this is the campus of engineering. We are next to a river, which is not difficult here in Valdivia. I am part of the Institute of Naval Architecture and Naval and Maritime Science. That's the direct translation, but it's just the same as everywhere: naval architecture and ocean engineering. So we have on the Miraflores campus, which is engineering, around 2,500 students. In naval architecture, we have around 180. And the reason why we have so many is because we have 3 areas. We have naval architects and ocean engineers, but also we have people who study to go into shipping. So we have people, pilots for vessels, and we have engineers for vessels, people who travel all over the world carrying cargo. So they also study here. And we have this Master of Engineering or Master of Science program in Naval Architecture and Ocean Engineering. And we have the only hydrodynamic test facility in Chile, and one of the 3 recognized by ITTC in South America, the other 2 being in Brazil. Let me see if I can get this right, because I'm going to show you something. Okay. Some reason it doesn't, it's typical, it doesn't, there you go. So I'm going to show you something here. There's it's a small video, it's a 1-minute video, so it shouldn't be an issue to see this. So just to give you an idea of what we do here, this is like all everywhere in the world, all buildings in the universities. And we work in naval architecture. That's one of the main things. And here you're gonna see our lab, which is a small wave towing tank, but it's really well equipped. And for the things that we do here in Chile, it's more than enough. So we do test for water resistant tests. We do test on waves. We do test on shallow water. In deep water, we have cameras, and that's a part of our lab in machines. So everyone who wants to work on engines in the vessels, they have to go through there and really work on that. We have a simulator for the people who work on who are pilots, and the students also have a small club where they have these sailboats, so they don't just study boats, but they have to get in the boat and in the water, as you see there. So it's really fun because they put into, they applied everything that we do in the classroom, they applied in those small boats. And here is one of the jewelry that we have, the one that I like because I work here all day long. It's our towing tank. As you see there, it's small, but we have really cool equipment. We have a Qualisys motion tracking system, which means that we can do seakeeping experiments. We have multiple load sail wave props, which is typical for this. And the last equipment that we have is quite cool. It's an underwater PTV system, which means that we can track particles in the water, so we can define the whole velocity, acceleration, and pressure field in a small volume of water underwater. So if we want to see the flow at the bow or at the stern of the ship, we can do it. And then all that data helps the people working on numerical simulations to validate data, or we can see interactions in the vessel, or maybe in a fishing net, or maybe on a column of a semi-submersible that we want to improve. We can define the whole velocity field with this PTV system. It's an upgrade from a typical PIV system when you have to superimpose images and follow particles. Here, instead of using multiple images, basically what you're doing is you're following every single particle in the water. And this is something that takes a lot of computer power, and each time that we haven't done many projects with this, because the amount of data that you get is massive. So you have weeks and weeks of data. But it's quite interesting. So the areas and where we work in ships, we work in aquaculture, offshore renewable energy, and others. I'm going to show you some examples of what we do. For example, when you have nets for aquaculture or fishing, you need this sort of validation, not validation, but you need the data of to get the drag forces, because the drag force that you're gonna get on the net is massive, as it's gonna be your main load to design the mooring system for the fish cage at the end of the day. So the only way to be certain that you're gonna get the load right is to do these sort of experiments where you run experiments along the towing tank, and you get the drag coefficients of different nets at different angle of attacks. So this is what we have here, and everything is get all the data is stored, it's acquired and stored through this 6 degree of freedom load cell that we have. Then we have done a lot of work on these models of different cages. As you can see here, this model is just sort of a tube made out of a net that is a metallic net made of copper alloy. And then you have a similar system here that we have worked with this sort of cages similar to boxes. And all of these structures seem so simple because we are working in parallel with the numerical simulation of these systems. So when you want to do some numerical simulations, you have to have really simple experiments to actually validate your code. If you start putting some complex structure in the water, the problem is not going to be the simulation of the flow, but it's going to be the definition of your structure in your software, and that's going to give you a headache at the end of the day. So everything that we do in the water, now we are moving and we're transferring that data into the numerical simulations. The one that we have here at the top is using an open source code, which is called Reef 3D, developed by the University of NTNU in Norway. and it has particular element that allows you to model nets. So but it is an open source, so they have validated for the cages that they have in Norway, but for the nets and the system that we use in Chile, there is no validation. So we are working towards that. And the results that we are getting are quite good. As you can see, we have the elevations on the columns. It looks quite good, the definition of the flow. And this was done with a small computer. So now we are moving towards a more complex simulation where we are including deformation. So the picture here at the left, you see this the same case that we have here, but now subjected to constant current. And now we are processing that data and we are simulating that in the software. And since this net is a metallic net, a copper alloy net, the deformation that you're going to have is quite different to the traditional nets made of polyester. So it's a more complex simulation because you have the interlocking effect as in chains, where you have the chains that get attached together and they don't deform anymore. So here we have the same problem. And modeling that has been a challenge, but now I have a grad student who is working towards that, and we are trying to simulate that case. Here you see that we also work on the seakeeping aspect of different platforms. So a company some years ago, they wanted to develop a new platform, and these platforms are basically used for the storage of the food for the fish in the water. So they wanted to know, we go with a traditional, system like this one, which is basically something box with bow, or a system made out of columns. And we did all the tests, just regular tests. We got the RAO for these systems. And at the end of the day, the issue was, first of all, making columns was a little bit more complicated, but also in a system with columns where you start to, consume the food, the fish eats a lot of food every day, so you're gonna have large differences of draft in your platform. You're gonna have moving kg. The center of gravity is gonna move constantly up and down as you put food on the platform. You take out food out of the platform, and this is going to create problems with the stability of the platform. So they decided on a more traditional hull based on the analysis that we did at the lab, and this is the final product. They now have these things. So it's really cool to see that things that happen, these experiments that we do in the lab help companies to take decisions, to make decisions, and finally you end up with a product. Just to give you an idea, the size of this thing is approximately 60-meter length and 25 meters wide.
Is it gonna be inside the cage or like the platform?
No. This is next to the fish farms.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to show you a picture and you'll see how this distributes. This is something that is because we have the water is so good here in Chile, so we have a big issue with biofouling. So what you see here in the picture, it's a net on a fish farm, and the net is 50 meters below water depth, and you don't see the nets because it's full of fouling. And this creates a lot of additional resistance, a lot of additional weight. So we did some experiments with these 3D printed mussels and 3D printed mollusks that we have here in Chile, and we calculated the additional drag. So now that additional drag can be included on the calculations for the fish farms. This is something that we did, and it's something unique. We're working on this paper. We put some nets in the water, and we let the mussels grow on them. And then we took that out of the water, and we carried out drag tests on the lab with these live mussels. So now we have data of the increase of the drag forces on nets with real fouling. Because a lot of people have done it, but with parametrization of drag or with approximation data, but we took the nets out of the water and put it in the lab. One thing that it was challenging here is that this was salt water, you know, and here we have fresh water. So these changes in the salinity makes that your muscles actually live for a really short period of time. So we have to carry these experiments in a really fun way. So in the morning we have to go to the water, get all the samples, and in the afternoon we have to be doing experiments. So we did experiments pretty much all night long for 3 or 4 weeks until we carry out the 150 experiments. So that was fun. We do a lot of work with wave energy converters because we are working on the ways to reduce the use of fossil fuels on fish farms. And one way is to, in the same space, locate the fish farms and also these devices to create energy on site. So we are working with this, articulated body, and we have, which is something really simple, but it's something that can be built here, can be easily, enlarged or do a small version of this. And we are working also with numerical simulation, in this case with NEMO, which is a open source panel method code developed by the French. And another interesting project that we're working on, this is the floating wind turbine that I was talking about at the beginning. So this was the model that we did at the lab. We carry out experiments, and we also did some numerical simulation with FAST, with OpenFast, and with Captain, which is Nemo for Python. And we compare this with the experimental data, and usually those things match quite well. But here we found a challenge, and it's because this platform has this sort of moon pool here in the center, so we cannot analyze the response with a linear model. So we're going to have to CFD. We're going to have to go to CFD to analyze the response, and that's what we're doing now. We already did. We improved a lot the numerical simulations because the issue here is like when you have a platform that has a body like the one here in yellow and you have the moon pool, basically what you have is a two-body problem. So you have the mass of water in the center and you have the platform itself. And plus you have the load from the generator here, the wind turbine. So you have multiple sources of uncertainty, and we check that the main issue here was the moon pool, because these columns you see here, the draft, so the pontoons that connects the columns are actually so close to the water line that you have a lot of viscous effect there that you cannot really capture in a panel method code. So we are working towards a better numerical simulation, and we already did it on CFD. And since the industry needs a lot of different vessels to transfer people, to move equipment, to move food for the fish, etc., we have particular vessels here that we test all the time at the lab. Here, similar to this one, a fast crew vessel, and then a multi-use platform. And also we work with non-traditional aquaculture, because you think that maybe fish is all that we have, but since we have mussels, we have algae, we also have developed new infrastructure for small communities so they can develop a small aquaculture in their places. And here we have a river close to the city where we have developed this structure. This system is basically when you fill it with water, it becomes neutrally buoyant, so you can put it at different places on the water column. And the reason why we wanted to do this was to avoid wind, waves, and also because we have a river where because it rains so much here, you're going to have the river coming to the ocean with fresh water, and the salinity of your area is going to, go down so fast that if you have any species growing on salt water, it's going to die because of the low salinity. But if you go deep into the water column, the salinity stays the same pretty much all year round. So that's why we developed this system now, and it's working. We tested on a couple of sites, and one of them work, and another it doesn't. but this is the infrastructure that is now helping the small communities around the university. So in Chile, how we do it and why do we care about it? Because last year, we were not just the largest producer of salmon in the world, but also of mussels. This is how it looks like in the south of Chile, where we have all these buoys, and each one of these buoys, you have hanging one of these lines with mussels. And here we have mussels that are quite massive. That's why I have this picture here. It's as large as a potato, as a large potato. So you have mussels that are pretty much 15 centimeters. This is something quite particular here in Chile. So we export that to all over the world, and here is our main product, salmon. So this is how a salmon of 5 kilos looks like next to a person, and this is how a fish farm works. So you have all these cages here, and you have here the one that it's right here. I'm going to show you here. This one is the feed barge where you have all the food, you have the people, you have all the monitoring equipment, and also usually you have one of these vessels here that is sort of a landing craft where you can transfer personnel, you can transfer any thing that you're gonna need for your production. And these things are like so far away in the country as you can see here in this map. So this is the area of Chile where where aquaculture is actually being carried out. You can see that it's pretty much half of the country in the south. And Universidad Austral has campuses who have presence on all this area with a campus here, another campus here, another campus here. So we work in aquaculture because we live in the places where aquaculture is carried out. Each one of these dots that you see here in this area, it's one of the concessions or permits that companies have to carry out aquaculture in the channels. This
So
one
which
here,
one?
for example.
So the water is the broad one?
Yes, the water is a blue one. Yes. So here, for example, what you're seeing in this picture is this area here. So pretty much the end of the world. So these guys are working in conditions that are really rough with high seas, even though you are in sort of protected areas, is really far away. So all the logistics to actually carry, fuel for the generators, food for the fish, etc., it's quite complicated. Every year we have around 400 active fish farms. The reason why we don't have all the dots with fish farms is because you produce fish for 1 year and then you have to move your whole production site, your whole structure to a different site because otherwise you're gonna end up with a huge environmental problem. So you are moving these fish farms every year.
So does it regulate it within the country or
Yes.
does it have, okay.
Yes. So you have, they call it one production period and one sleep period. So it's one by one. So if it took you a year and a half to produce your fish, you're gonna have to leave the site a year and a half to sort of, recuperate the water and the bottom and everything because you have a lot of, for example, the excrement from the fish and the food that is not eaten, it's getting at the bottom.
So I'm guessing you're not moving the whole structure, you're just like moving between infrastructures, or do you have to move all the infrastructures, like tow it out or something like that, or?
Yes, you have to tow out the whole thing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, for example, and just to give you an idea, this one is each square here is 50 meters. So here you have 100 meters, and here you have 100, and here you have 250 by 100 meters. So this is the size of this thing. So it's like one soccer field. So you have to move 2 soccer fields to a different location every couple of years. Plus your feed barge here. So these are the conditions. We work in shelter areas with the steel cages, always with a feeding barge and small support vessels, as you see here. The current speed here in Chile, we work up to 3 knots with significant wave height up to 4 meters. and we have a strong local winds. Those are the conditions, the design conditions that we use here. And it's quite interesting because if you go to Norway, the code in Norway to do the engineering of these things, they consider 3 knots of water current an offshore site. And here, all the sites in Chile are over 3 knots. So, because everyone have different, consideration. And here in Chile, we work in really high energy environments, even though these are protected areas. But it's a challenge. And this is the issue that we have in the south of Chile, in this area, which is the place where aquaculture started in Chile. We have so many of them that this is just one channel, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fish farms, and this you have a mussel farm. So in these areas, there were so much density of production that at some point, for example, if you have one of these fish farms, somehow you have diseases there and transmit to all other places, and it means that you're gonna have losses of up to $5-6 million. That's the rough number of money that you have in one of these fish farms. So now we don't work in this way. So that's for example, in this channel they don't allow more than, I think, 4 of these fish farms are actually active, and the other ones are not at the same time because the density was so much at some point that we have in 2008 a big disaster. We have diseases in the water of the salmon, and pretty much we lost the whole production of 1 year. So the country almost collapsed that year. The main species that we produce are salar, coho, and trout. And you see here the amount of time that we have them on the water. In the case of salar, they are 14 to 18 months in seawater, 8 to 10 months for coho, and 8 to 10 months for trout. And the commercial weight, it's for salar between 4 and 6 kilos, coho 3, and trout 3 kilos. This is the whole process of the salmon. So first you start in fresh water with the eggs, then you have the hatching of the fish, then you have a smolt, which is around 100 grams. And this is the point when you transfer the fish to seawater, to the cages in the water. Then you have it in the water for 14, 22 months, up to 5-6 kilos. Then you transfer them to a slaughtering station and then start the process of production. So you can sell it on fillet, you can sell it of a small bite, pieces. It depends on the market that you're shipping to. And here is a picture that it used to be right. Now salmon is pretty much transferred all over the world by plane. For example, you have one salmon in Chile here today, and it's gonna be in Walmart in the US in less than 48 hours. So it has to be that fast because otherwise the meat gets bad. So this is how it looks like. This is interesting because you see the picture that I show you, you have a soccer stadium at the surface, but then underwater you have a 10-story building. You have nets up to 30 meters water depth. And the densities that we use are quite lower compared to the densities of production in Norway. It means that in Norway, fishes are more, close together inside the cage. But here in Chile, we have lower densities of production because we have different diseases in the water. We have different things that affect the fish. So we work with 8 to 17 kilograms by cubic meter, which means that you're going to have 3 fishes in each cubic meter in your farm. So that means that for an 8x2 farm, it means that you have 2 cages in the width and 8 cages on the length. You can have production up to 5,000 tons. I don't know how much is the price of salmon in where you live, but for example, in the States, that the number that I always have in my mind, the kilo is around $12-15. So that's a ton of money that you have. So it's quite interesting. And this is something really particular to salmon. This slide is in Spanish. I'm sorry, but I can tell you the important point is this. For example, if you want to grow a chicken, you have to give them. If you're gonna have a chicken of 1 kilo, you have to spend 2 kilos of food to grow the chicken. But in salmon, if you're gonna have 1 kilo of salmon, you have to spend just 1 kilo of food. And for example, for cows, if you're gonna have if you need 1 kilo of cow meat or red meat, you're gonna need 10 kilos of grass or whatever you're feeding your animal. So it's much more efficient to grow fish than chicken or cows, etc. And also it uses a lot less water and a lot less, the carbon footprint is really small when you compare it to cows. So this is something that makes support the idea of using cultivating more fish. So cages are composed of interconnected walkways. As you see, are the main pieces, and basically what we have here is all these walkways that are around 9 and 11 meters, depending if you have a cross connection or just walkway. These are made out of steel, galvanized steel, are interconnected with pins. So this is a really flexible system at the end, made out of different pieces. If you see, this is one of the places where they build this. They build them on widths of 2 to 3 meters, so you can walk on this area. You can put some equipment on the top, and with pieces of steel quite heavy. So you have 250 by 50 by 5 millimeters profiles here, or tubes. These are really massive. They weigh a ton in the water. And the only way that they stay in the water is because they use these sort of boxes, these floaters at the bottom. So it's quite a simple system, but it's quite effective in the conditions that we have. So when you have waves, this thing is going to deform. And deformation, actually, what it does, it dissipates energy. So it means that your system is more, it works better on waves than a rigid system. We also have cages made of HDPE, these sort of plastic pipes. This one is 40 meters in diameter. We don't use this one in Chile that much because the mooring system is more complex. You have to do a grid underwater. So getting a boat, for example, here you see a boat that is located next to the fish farm, but doing the same operation here is more complicated because you can have entangled ropes in the propeller, and also you don't have a space to walk around them. So you need a higher level or automation or different equipment to work with HDPE cages that's why we don't use them here. In terms of nets, we have different sort of nets. We use metallic nets in some areas, really exposed areas, and also we have these nylon nets. In Chile, we have a combination of a predator net because we have sea lions. So sea lions are always trying to get inside the cages because they have basically free food when they get inside. So we have a hull protection outside, and then we have an internal net that protects the fish. So when you see this, it looks like this. So you have this cage, this net outside, the predator net. Then we have the biomass net. You have all the floaters that actually support the walkways here. Then you're gonna have a fence that is gonna be all over the place, all around, because sea lions also can jump on top of the walkways and get inside the cage. And also then you have uh, you have all these other animals that can actually get on top of this. So you have to cover the whole system, because then you have the sea lions and something can happen. So basically all is covered. And this is a picture that I like because this is in front of one of the places where I work when I work in a different location. And it has exactly 5 stories. So this is when you see this is basically the size of a fish farm underwater. So what this building here is what you have underwater in a fish farm. It has exactly the same dimension. It has 100 meters length, it has 40 meters width, and 30 meters in height. What you see at the surface is just a small portion of what the system actually involves, because underwater you have the mooring system. This is the typical distribution of mooring lines that we use here in Chile and in other places in the world. So you work with the fish farm here in the surface, but then you have to moor this thing, and to do that you use these lines, really long lines, and the attachment point is usually either a dead weight or an anchor. So the footprint on the bottom is huge, and the places where we work are quite complicated. This is the bathymetry of one of the channels that I have worked on. The channels here in Chile have this sort of traditional V shape because it's basically the glaciers that have, retracted over the years, and it gives you this trench. So you have basically vertical walls at the side and a huge depth in the middle of the channel. So it's quite challenging to do moorings in these areas, but we have done it over the years, and it works. And this is, for example, an extreme case that I work on where we have a really complex bathymetry, and here you have the cage, and then all the lines, all the mooring lines, and you see there that you have a ton of ropes and chains in the water. The mooring system is really, really complicated in these areas. And this is a Go
Christian,
ahead.
just a quick question. Just wondering. So you mentioned earlier that you need to move these cages like a couple of times every couple of years. So do you have to detach all of this mooring and then you tow it away? Okay, it's gonna be a
Yeah.
lot of work, isn't it?
Yes, it is a lot of work because in this particular case you have close to 50 mooring lines. So you detach, basically it's a Lego.
Yeah.
So you detach all the nets, you put it in a boat, then you started disconnecting the cages and disassembling the cages, and then you're gonna have to go and pick up either the dead weight or the anchor. But you have to leave the place clean for a couple of years. But it's something that people are so used to do it here, but they don't really care. But now they are building technology to actually clean the bottom of this area, so they don't have
Oh,
to move it. So it's like a huge vacuum cleaner for the bottom of the ocean.
so like the pool vacuum, like the
Something like that, but imagine that being like a small car going
right.
around the fish farm. Yeah. So this is just the typical stuff that we give to the companies that actually installing these things. These are typical materials. You see here the diameters, chains of 22 millimeters or ropes of 60 millimeters, and you say, well, for oil and gas this is nothing. Yes, but for what we do here in Chile, this is more than enough. It works really well, and it gives us the position in the world that we have now. So it's interesting. Here is something that I really like to show because it shows how close to some areas these fish farms are located. This is the Chiloé Island in the south, and one of the issues that we're going to talk in a couple of minutes. This, for example, is a solution for the energy. So it's natural gas that with that natural gas you produce energy. And they also have this sort of floating PV platform. So one company now is selling these things, with solar panels to, again, reduce the consumption of fossil fuels in the barge, because otherwise the only way that you have to generate energy is through generators with diesel. And the problem with the diesel is not that we don't have diesel. The problem is that you have to be carrying out diesel every single day to these places, and these places are really far away, and carrying diesel all over the place in areas where you have whales, where you have other marine mammals, and where you have national parks, it's a risk. So we need to have local generation, and this is the two alternatives that people are now looking at. This was the picture that I showed you before, the feed barge hulls made out of steel or concrete with capacities of 400 to 800 tons each one. Why they need so much food on site? Because you can have these fish eat a lot of food. It could be up to 1 ton per cage per day. So if you have 20 cages, you have 20 tons every single day. So it means that 400 tons is going to last you 20 days. And you need to be there a year. So every single day you have vessels going to these places, and it's like a delivery system where they deliver food to all these small dots that I show you in the picture. And then some cool technologies. For example, this one over here, you know that for chicken you have to control the hours that the chicken have light or dark. With the salmon is exactly the same. So you put green light and you control their cycle. When you have areas that it has low levels of oxygen, you have to inject oxygen inside the cages. And when you have microalgae, the microalgae actually it's something that happened here in the south of Chile. The microalgae basically suffocates the fish. So we protect the fish farms with this. What you see here. This is a bubble curtain. So you inject the water in pipes underwater. It creates a bubble curtain around the fish cage, and that protects from the microalgae. Vessels that we use these wellboats. As I said, we take the fish alive. We put it inside this vessel that is basically a huge swimming pool now in the traveling in the water, and we take it to the place where we process the fish. Why we do that? Because you know that the problem with any animal when you kill it is that the blood starts to decompose so fast. So if you kill it on site and you move it, you're gonna lose quality on your meat. But if you get with the fish alive to the place where you're gonna do the full process, you gain quality on your meat. So that's why I like this, because you don't really care about the structure, about the building, but you have to think about also in terms of biology, in terms of environment, in terms of multiple factors. We have these small vessels, these small boats to move around the farm, and also these sort of landing craft that are quite particular here in Chile. I haven't seen that many of these vessels all over the place, and the reason why is because they have this platform in the bow, so you can get pretty much anywhere, lower that, and you can transfer a car, a bus, whatever you need. It's basically a tractor, but for the water. It's a multi-purpose vessel, and it's really useful everywhere. This vessel here, it's a small catamaran that allows you to do this maneuver of installing the fish farm, or maybe lifting dead weight or an anchor. And this vessel here is something that I'm pretty sure it's unique to Chile. Since we have issues with some small animals that get attached to the skin of the fish, really small, they are maybe a centimeter, that it's called, in English, I don't remember the name, but in Spanish they call it piojo. So it's like bed bug, but that attacks the fish. And the way to kill it is to actually bath the fish in fresh water. So what this vessel does, it takes all the fish from the cage and put it in fresh water, and then return the fish to the cage. And this it's like a huge washing machine for salmon. And there are two vessels of this type here in Chile, and I think it's the only place in the world where we have this technology. Now it's a fun part. What are the challenges? The challenges is that at some point something's going to go wrong. And you see here, this fish farm here intact, and the one over there used to be the same as the one here. What happened here is that we have a huge amount of rain in one area, and we have an area on land that actually moves. So we have a lot of land getting into the water, so a small tsunami, local tsunami, and destroy this fish farm. So that's something that when you are in oil and gas platform, you don't care about the tsunami because it's going to be a small wave for you. But when you are close to the shore, you have to take into account that something that this could happen. This one was a huge storm that we have. The whole mooring system was in place. You see here the buoys. Nothing happened to the mooring system. By the system, but all the walkways, they were like completely destroyed because someone thought that, this is a protected area, so we're gonna put a rigid system, not this interconnected system. And because the waves, this thing started to trying to flex, and it couldn't flex anymore, and it just created a whole mess here. The government put a fee on this, around $10 million. The company had to pay $10 million because of this accident. So, and there are many, many issues with this. For example, this one is another accident that we have. Also here, it was a mooring system problem. Vessels that sink because, the crew, sometimes they are not well prepared to do maneuvers. Lifting an anchor, lifting a dead weight that is around 40 tons in weight is not something simple. You have to think about it. And this is a feed barge that went out underwater as well. This is some of the health problems that you have with the fish. These are the diseases that I was talking to you about, that we need to take care of. And also you can, from the structure point, you can avoid diseases with these bubble curtains, or maybe with some tarpaulin, some sort of net that is quite with a small opening, so you can protect the fish. We have the entanglement, for example, here, this is a whale that got caught into the mooring system in a fish farm, and there was a big issue here in the news, and it's something that happens, and we need to avoid this. So we are looking at new ways to do the mooring lines. In terms of offshore aquaculture now, this is the system that we have, and in terms of offshore aquaculture, we had two projects here in Chile. One of them is this cage that you see here, that is basically HDPE cage that can go underwater if needed. It's a concept that it's been around for almost 10 years, but we haven't put it in a commercial state yet. But in the experimental state, it worked quite well. So probably some companies are going to go with that. And why you want to go underwater? Because if you have a high storm, a high energy seas, you just lower your cage and you're going to protect your fish from the waves. And the other option is more traditional. You have this big square here is 80 by 80 meters. So instead of having all these divisions, they just created a stronger cage. And this one is actually working, and it's working quite fine. It's a ton of steel, but it works really well. And this one is installed in a place where we have 150-meter water depth. So both of these projects have been doing really well in the water, and we are monitoring them because probably in the next 10 years, these are going to be the systems that we're going to use here in Chile. For the project, for the circular cage, we did a lot of, we did tests in the lab, and here we saw this issue with the deformation of this copper alloy net, that at some point it doesn't deform anymore, and it's just the deformation gets blocked. And this is something that we cannot properly model in a numerical simulation, so we're working on a new model now. In that case, we did a lot of numerical simulation, and then the good thing is that not only numerical simulation, but we also went and measured the loads in the water. So we have load cells in the water, and we have a constant monitoring of this system, and we get plots like this. So now we have data to correlate the wind, wave, and the mooring tension with all, and now we have like a year of data, so we are processing that, and we're hoping to get something out of that data in the future. But this is the future of this industry. You have to, every time that you go to more exposed areas, you're going to have to measure a lot more than you are doing now. Because the issue is that people forget that the best way to have a good infrastructure is the infrastructure that you model, that you monitor, and that you improve, but with data in the water. So now everything is measured. For example, here is something quite simple. We just put a drone and we measure with the strong currents how much is the displacement that we have in the surface. And we got up to 11 meters. So the mooring system that we designed allows this thing to move, but we have a movement that is almost 11 meters. So we're going to put more cages close to each other. We have to consider the motion of these things in the surface.
So how do you expect, like, whenever you took the photograph, how do you expect
Uh-huh.
when it will happen? Like, because this is really interesting. Like, you're not monitoring it all the time, right? So for
Uh,
this photograph particularly, yeah.
because we have all the tides, so we know
Ah,
in
okay,
what,
okay,
yeah, so correlate with the tides. So in
okay.
this case, we have two ADCPs in the water. So we are measuring the water velocities, and we have the tides, and we say, okay, now we're gonna fly. And you see the time stop here. We started at 2 p.m. and we finish at 5 p.m. So we saw the whole cycle.
So this is the tidal current driven, like,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
motion. Okay, okay.
Uh-huh. So this is okay. I'm gonna show you this because this is sort of the cool videos that I like to show, because people don't realize how strong winds are here in. Oh, I haven't paid the Prime in YouTube yet. There you go. So this is the south of Chile, and this is one day of a normal condition.
Is it inside the,
Yeah,
the channel?
yes, this is inside the channel. This is a view from the feet, from the pontoon that you have there, where you have the food
Oh
for the
wow,
feet. And there you
it's
have
really
the
choppy.
fish farm. Huh?
It's really choppy.
Yes,
Like the
it's really,
fish.
really true. And you see how the cages deform, right? You see the wave profile on the fish farm. Just wait a second, he's gonna, you there you go. See? You see the wave profile there.
Right, right, right.
So and you see the curtains how they move, right? So you have a
Yeah.
pitch of plus minus 10 degrees, like nothing. And this is just normal condition for these people. So it's fun. It's definitely fun. And how this looks like in the world? Well, when we talk about aquaculture, ocean aquaculture, exposed aquaculture, every country, there is no a single definition. And this is something that is quite interesting to talk about it, because, for example, for FAO, you have an offshore aquaculture when you have water depth more than 50 meters, significant wave height over 5 meters, and 2 kilometers from shore. Okay, Norway, they said significant wave height larger than 3 meters and current speed up to 1.5 with 3 knots. Australia, they define that offshore is farther than 3 kilometers, water depths more than 50 meters, the significant wave height 3 meters, and then
Yeah.
current speed 3 knots. In Chile, we don't have a definition, but all our sites and in water depths, larger than 50 meters, the significant wave height that we designed for is 4 meters. The current speed is 3 knots. So for every country, the definition of offshore is going to be different.
So is it like 50 years return period, or is it for the operational, yearly or time yearly return period?
We're talking 50 years return
50 years,
return
okay.
period here. Yeah, 50 years. But anyway, it's the normal conditions here in Chile are the extreme conditions in different places. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are working with the government on defining this. So this is a picture of what we propose to the government here. Talking to interior waters where you have limited fetch in all quadrants. then exposed when you have a fetch that is around 120, and then offshore when you are completely exposed on one side. And this was some definition that we proposed to the government, and they are looking at it because we need a definition for what is next, which is regulations, because there are not that many regulations here. And for example, the one that we use, pretty much everyone in the world, we use this Norwegian standard that was made for them. But here in Chile, we had to do some modifications, and now we have our own standard for the calculation of buoying systems and cages for aquaculture here in Chile, and we're in the reviewing process. But then DNB and ABS, they have these rules for classification for fish farms. But basically what they did, they took all the information from oil and gas and they transferred it here.
Right.
The
Yeah,
problem,
it always happens. And
the problem with that is that
yeah,
if you do the calculation, instead of having a rope of 60 millimeters, you're going to end up with something
right.
like a meter, and your mooring system is going to cost more than the whole fish that
Right.
you produce. So it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's why every country needs to have its own regulation, its own reality, because otherwise, you know, you end up with something that is it's not feasible. This is how it looks like, and people call it offshore. These three structures are actually installed. The Hab Farm is the largest fish farm in the world, installed in Norway. It's 400 meters length and 80 meters wide. But it's not offshore because it's installed in a channel. And for example, the energy to this huge farm is just a cable at the bottom. So it's not really offshore. The same happened with Ocean Farm 1, which is 110 meters in diameter and 60 meters depth. It's installed in 50-meter water depth or something like that. No, 100-meter water depth. But also the energy is transferred via a cable. And this one over here is in China and also is close to the shoreline. So we don't have really something offshore. We don't have anything installed that is, you know, able to produce the energy that we need for the production. So offshore, the big limitation is the production of energy. Here, there is a nice picture of a Hexbox, which is a company in Norway that tried to sell this idea, this semi-submersible cage with wind generation, with hydrogen generation, etc. It was just a concept that they never built it. But this was intended, this was a real offshore production because it's gonna produce its own energy. But also, maybe there are other places in the world where they are not looking at offshore, but inland with this RAS system, which is basically recirculation system. You have a huge swimming pool and you inland, and you just move the water inside and you grow fish inland. That's something that people are also looking at. And for example, in Australia, people are looking at things like this. In the consortium that is the Blue Economy, they are looking at a cage that is an underwater cage, submersible cage, that it has the same size of the fish farms that we have here in Chile, but it's made out of HDPE pipes. So it's robust, reliable. It's a single point mooring system, so it's going to align with the main load conditions. And it's now in its design stage. It's already done, so now they are working on the design of the mooring system and more simulations and validation. And the idea is to build this around 2030. This is a point that is quite interesting to me because in one side you have these small oil and gas platforms that people are looking and working on now in Norway, and they can do that because they have the vessels for the installation of offshore platform, etc. But in countries like Australia, where aquaculture is it's a small industry yet, this is a middle point that is not that expensive, uses material that are available, is reliable, is going to be in the water for a couple of years and cycle like in Chile. So this makes more sense than these huge structures. For Chile now, we are designing, with one of my students, we're designing a cage similar to this, a smaller unit, because shipyards here are smaller than the one in Australia. but on the same concept, using HDPE pipes, doing all the calculations and see if that makes sense in terms of money. And this is the issue. I mean, there is nothing really offshore yet because we need energy. So that's why aquaculture is one of the main markets for ocean renewable energy. We are looking at this right now. A couple of years ago, we saw these pictures on papers and different material around. This was the short solution, putting floating solar panels or wind turbines on the existing infrastructure, or maybe in the future integrating the cage with some wind turbines. Well, this is not the future anymore. This is a company in Norway that they are actually reusing these HDPE pipes cages, and now they put a flexible sheet at the top, and then the floating solar panels. So they are selling this as a unit for fish farm. So here you have the fish farm. Here you have an old recycled fish pen that now it's covered with solar panels. And this is something that happened last year. This is the first wind and solar power offshore aquaculture project in China. This is a semi-submersible vessel, I mean, hull here with a turbine, and the whole space in the middle is now a fish cage. So this is something where the main idea, the main product here was energy, was a wind turbine. But since we have this space here, okay, let's cover it with net, and we have fish now there. And this thing is working, and it's probably the way to go for China, integrating aquaculture into floating wind. But here in Chile, we are looking at different options. All of this that you see here is not a new idea. These are projects from 20 years ago. This is a Topos project, a European community project, where they envision this sort of integrated space in the water. The one here at the bottom, it was a floating port, so you don't have to get your vessel to shore, but you can transfer cargo in the water. Here is a leisure island, and here is a concept for energy, where you have this sort of multi-purpose platform where you have different sort of energies and also aquaculture. And in Europe, in the north of Europe, they are looking at using these monopile turbines and using them as an anchor position for the production of algae, mussels, and other products of aquaculture. So these are ideas of 20 years ago that just now some countries are actually working on. And this is the thing that we're working here in Chile. This is our small platform that you saw in the lab. This is how it's going to look in reality. It's going to be quite small, but it's just a prototype, a concept, because we are looking at the experience, for example, of University of Maine in the US, where they built a small prototype, they put it in the water, they tested over a year, and they got a lot of data for the commercial scale. So we are following the same idea. And all of that is because one of the concepts that actually was quite interesting in the last year was the digital twin, right? Everyone wants to have a digital twin of the infrastructure. But if you're going to have that, you need a lot of data. So that's why we're moving into getting a prototype in the water, getting data from the fish farm, from the wind turbine, and trying to build a digital twin. Offshore aquaculture, we have issues. And the main issue, I would say, for example, one of the issues is if you're going to work in the water, now there is a lot of research on this crew transfer vessel, an interaction between floating or fixed wind turbines and vessels, crew transfer vessels, because it's not easy to move people in a thing that is floating and one thing that is huge, big, or small. But the other issue that we have in the water is here, the governance. It's all about policy, because when you want to have something offshore, when you're going to have something, when you are pushing an industry into a new boundary, the problem that you're going to have is that there is no clear set of rules in the country. So who I'm going to talk to if I want a permit to put something in the water? Do I have to talk with 1, 2, 3 agencies? Here is a chart, for example, for the European Union. So this part over here are all the permits that you're gonna need in Europe to get something in the water. So you start with the environmental, animal welfare, marine regulation, and you're gonna have to read all of that to put something on the water. Probably you're not gonna have a clear answer of what do I have to do, what plans do I need, what studies do I need, who is gonna sign what document, etc., and etc. That's a big issue. So before the infrastructure, that's simple because we know how to calculate things, we know how to design things, but talking to lawyers and regulators, that's that's a big task. And finally, ocean engineers, where we work on this? Well, we're gonna work on structures, mooring vessels, regulation. The social acceptance of this is so important to give information to people, research and development. And finally, I would say that it's a lot more exciting than oil and gas. In oil and gas, there is always a code, there is always a formula, there is always something that you can do. And here, this one that I have here at the right, of course, I ask ChatGPT, give me some idea about the future of offshore aquaculture. And it was really fun. I always have fun working with ChatGPT. But this is an important point. It says naval architects and ocean engineers are central to designing these durable and efficient structures. So we are at the center of one revolution for the future. So just as a conclusion, it's a lot more complex than people think. People think that putting fish in the water and grow them, it's easy. It's like the cowboy that we saw there in the cartoon. No, it's not. We have to take into account environmental, economical, biological aspects. Technologies are quite important. Structure is quite important. Data, it's important. We have to have good data to make better decisions. And offshore farming brings solution, but also many challenges. And the good thing is like everyone in the world, I know the naval architecture, ocean engineering is pretty much the same. We have the tools, and it's something that is gonna grow because the population is growing. We're gonna need more food. We're gonna need particular more protein, and fish is an excellent answer. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that the information helps you to better understand the industry. And if you have any questions now, I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, you can either email me or scan that code, and it's going to take you to my LinkedIn page, so you can contact me as well. That's it.
Hey, thank you so much, Christian. Very interesting presentation. I have to admit that there's so many new information that I get from today's presentation. So from
that's good.
like different types of it has its own what do you call it, value chain, like in terms of the ocean engineer's perspective, like from the shipbuilding and then to the the fish farm itself, and then all the sectors that also support the fish farm, like from the diesel, like the vessel that bring the diesels to the fish farm and everything. Okay, I think someone's mic is okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
There
So
you go.
yeah, there's a lot of question actually, Christian. I hope we can cover all of it, but I think some of them already covered in your presentation. So I'll just filter it through and then
Okay.
mention a couple of it. There are a couple of questions about the real-time monitoring and also the digital twin. I believe you already covered it in your presentation as well. Like it's important, you mentioned, to get a lot of field data, and then also you already try to implement mooring monitoring systems, and also how the structure behaves under certain environmental conditions. So I think it's a working in progress, right? For the monitoring and digital twin. And also this is one interesting question. Since Chile is the world's largest copper producer, as you mentioned, imagine there's a growing competition for coastal and marine space. He previously worked for gold and copper mining, which site is located to coastal area. And as you already familiar, probably like usually mining industry has a tailing problem, like where some of their processing materials they have to uh, uh, the waste has to be disposed to the ocean. And
Yeah.
do you see any competing interests in Chile as well on the ocean space utilization? And how do you think like Chile or your country can better, or us as the country can better tackle it?
Well, in the good thing is like copper mining in Chile happens in the north and
Oh,
salmon in the
okay.
south. So we are not located in the same area. But in the north, for example, the issue that we have, we try to cultivate other species, not the one, not salmon, but some mollusk and shellfish. The problem that we're having is like they have a lot of desalination in the north
Mm.
for the mining industry, and when you put that water, the really salty water that gets as a byproduct, it changes completely locally. It changes completely the site. So because it's so much salt that it gets in the bottom and it changes your environment. So when we try to put something in the water, we measure the salinity and it was like super high because
Mm.
of this discharge. And there's nothing to do because they were there first. So that's a possible conflict that I see in the future. But at least now it's not a big issue because it's only research that we're doing in the water with new aquaculture. But in the future, if this thing works, yes, it's going to be a big issue. And now the government is working on I don't know there, but here the government always reacts to something. So now that they saw that we have a lot of water with high level of salt, with that high salinity, they say, oh, maybe it's an issue. I have to do something. And they are working on a new, regulation to extend the area where you discharge the water. Because if you discharge it in one point, you basically destroy the area.
Right. And it's different with fish farm where you can move around, right?
Right.
It's there, like
Yeah.
the industry is there. Like
Yeah.
it's very hard to move it around. Okay, thanks,
Mhm.
Christian, for the question. I hope it answers the question from Randy. And there's another question that's I think it's interconnected. So the first one is have you ever seen a country or other places where besides salmon other or a less lucrative maybe type of fish has been
Mhm.
cultivated successfully around the world, for example? Because here in Indonesia itself, I believe I just talked with my colleague from ITB as well, which is like another university besides Institute of Technology of Bandung, because here we don't have a strong background on the biology process or the biota itself. But he mentioned that a majority of our produce on that we produce on aquaculture is not salmon. It's actually a less a fish species usually that has less value than salmon. So have you ever seen other similar technology that have been successfully? Because here in Indonesia, for your information, we usually use very traditional methods
Mhm.
for coastal. We don't have offshore. For coastal fish farming, we usually use like either bamboo platform, or
Mhm. Yeah.
SDPE base. So it's not like a massive platform with steel or whatever. So what do you think about this? Like the value cost versus the
Okay.
productivity?
Well, there is a lot of production of tilapia, for example, all over the world, even in Africa, because tilapia basically you can do a hole in the water, in the ground, put some water, and tilapia is gonna grow. It's like the chicken of the fish farms. But in Asia, in China and Japan, Korea, you even have tuna. So the thing with tuna, you have to go and catch them in the wild and then grow them in cages. So that's an example of a high level fish that you can grow. Even in the United States, at an experimental level, they have a Campachi, which is in Hawaii. And Campachi is a lot more expensive than salmon, and it was quite successful. The problem again was regulation, so that's why they don't have more cages. Then you have in Greece, they also have productions inside of Mediterranean with a different fish, but it's just for local consumption. And then you have another species in Panama in an underwater production, a submersible cage that is also more expensive than salmon. It's not as large as the salmon industry, but they also do it. So it all depends on the conditions, and I would say more than the technology, it depends on regulation sometimes.
Regulation.
Mhm.
Because the other question is that what do you think is the main business drive why do the companies wants to move further offshore, for example? Because we see a couple
Oh,
of so that's also
okay.
one of the questions, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's an excellent question because you say, well, if we're doing this now, why go into more trouble, basically? Well,
Yeah.
because we don't have more space. In Chile, the government stopped giving you permits for aquaculture 10 years ago. So now if you want to grow, you're gonna have the only available spaces to actually apply for a permit are exposed areas or maybe offshore areas. So if you're gonna grow, you wanna produce more, you're gonna have to go further offshore. So that's the main idea. It's nothing else, it's nothing more than that. And also because in some places it happens as people already mentioned, you have this conflict with other users. And that's something that, if wind farms, if you can see a wind farm from the shore, people are going to be completely opposed to the wind
Yeah.
farms. But because
Right.
people don't see the wind farms, oh, wind farms are okay. Those are
Yeah.
awesome.
Not
So
in my backyard. Yeah.
yes, not in my backyard. That's pretty much it. I mean, it's incredible, but that's the short answer. You have to put something where nobody else see it because that's fine.
Yeah. So that's an excellent answer, I think. And so when we're moving further offshore, like you mentioned, we are more exposed to the more harsher environments. So in related to that, do you see a more restriction on in terms of environmental condition on the infrastructure side or on the uh, the fish or what you grow sides,
No.
because I believe the fish and the mollusks they also have a requirement on what's the ideal condition that they can live on, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's gonna be in the infrastructure because the fish actually likes to swim. I always
Mm.
tell my students, if you are all day watching TV, seated on your couch, your meat is useless. Basically, you're gonna be a lot of fat. But if you are on a treadmill all day long working, you're gonna be a fit guy and you're gonna be fine. With the fish, it's exactly the same. You want to have the fish swimming all day long because otherwise you're gonna have good quality of the meat. So if you go outside where you have stronger currents, stronger waves, for the fish it's gonna be better. The issue is that you're gonna have to design those conditions, and those are gonna be more expensive structures. They're gonna be, but also more reliable. So it's a trade-off. But for the fish side, it's better to have stronger conditions.
What's the harshest environmental condition that you've seen in a fish cage design, and
Oh,
it still stands, like it's actually being built and also.
okay. Well, this 4 meter significant wave height that we have, I've seen places where they have surpassed that, and it's been okay. I mean, like a couple of mooring lines probably the collapse or one cage gets a little bit twisted, but nothing happened at the end of the day. We work with really high safety factors because if you have a massive escape, it's going to be a huge impact on the industry because the fines of the government that today the fine is equivalent to the price of the fish.
So
So,
small margin, like the
I
margin of
mean,
error, small margin of
right,
error.
right. So we have to make sure that things are going to work.
Right. So when you're selecting the site for the fish cage, what's the usually becomes the defining factors? Is it, you know, like the current or the temperature, or
No,
what's
the currents are basically your driven factor, because the current is gonna give you the you know, the orientation of your fish farm, because you're gonna expose the shorter side of the farm to the stronger current, so you're gonna have less exposed area. And
Right.
another issue is that the permits that the government gives you, sometimes the polygon the polygon, it's really weird. So you want to have your fish farm in this position, but then you're gonna
Okay.
have waves in that direction. So because the government doesn't care where the wave or current comes from, they just give you a space and you have to play with that. So
Okay,
it's always a trade-off.
so the government already have lots of, you know, ocean space, and then people bid on it. Okay, so
Yeah.
you don't actually have a choice to have a fish farm outside the flooded
No,
area. Okay.
no. There are areas that say to say this area is up to it could be used for aquaculture. So I'm gonna have 50 permits, but that was 10 years ago. Since 2015, the government hasn't issued any new permits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question, I think, about risk mitigation. So if uh, the worst comes to worst, like mooring line failure, and then you know, fish farm become broken, like the one that you showed to us before. Is there any, you know, methods on how you defining the risk or mitigate the risk on those kind of cases?
And I mean, here it's based on data. You have a lot of monitoring on these cages. 10 years ago, it wasn't the case, but today, this mooring line tension monitoring, we are implementing that. On many companies are implementing that. We have environmental data, so I would say it's based on data. You
And
know.
also, yeah, I would guess that the, you know, the usually for the risk, you'll have the consequence of failure multiplied by the probability of failure, right? And I believe the consequence of failure, correct me if I'm wrong, it's mainly on the economic side, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so because you're in an open water and your product is not oil, it's not gas.
Yeah.
So the worst can happen is that the,
You know, but it's not just one is for the company immediately is economic, because it's gonna have
right,
to pay. But the big problem here is the social acceptance,
right,
because
right, yeah,
the industry it has a really bad reputation because of these massive escapes that they had some years ago. And now they're trying to rebuild this image, because they have been like 4 years since regulation was put into place for the design with this really large safety factor. That means that they have to put more money into mooring system and the structure, but we haven't had any accidents since that date. So now they are building, trying to build the trust of the people, because when you have a lot of people that say, these guys are using a space that is it's a public space to generate money, and on top of that, they are contaminating the water. They have fish now that is not native to the area in the water. They have to pay. So one thing, the money they get the money, they pay the fine. But this social acceptance is something that you cannot put a price on that, and it's something that can
right.
destroy your industry, basically.
There's also the same issue for most ocean renewable energy as well, right? Like
Yeah,
because it's so scarce, or what, you know, it's not natural like to have those kind of structures in it. And then once we have a failure, it's gonna
yeah.
be all over the news.
The,
And then
the other day, someone in Europe published a paper saying that the electromagnetic field of the cable transferring the energy from the wind turbine to the shore is going to affect the whales. And there is a paper on that, someone published
yeah,
that. When you
right.
said that it's clean energy, it's perfect, it's wind. No, the electromagnetic field is going to do.
Not
So,
the noise from the
no.
construction. Right, yeah.
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 Okay, I hope we have time for one last questions.
Yeah,
Let
go
me
ahead.
see. Little twins, station keeping, hydraulic properties. Hold on. It is Indonesian, mengingat bahwa banyak-banyak kebiasaan bukan pada so this is again related to how we implement most of our aquaculture infrastructure. I'm talking more about the infrastructure, not the fish itself, but we usually have more traditional uh, cages, like the one that we use bamboo or HDPEs,
Mhm.
and then just attach mooring lines without any, engineering design or perspective or whatsoever. Do you ever seen a similar transition in Chile or other part of the world, for example, from a more traditional infrastructure to a more modern one? And
No.
what usually drives those kind of transitions, do you think?
The driver is money. It's always money.
Of
I
course.
mean, that's the short answer. Here, Chile is the example. In the 80s, when the industry started, they started with the walkways that you see today were just, this the same as you said, we don't have bamboo, but we have a lot of wood. So these I don't know if you probably you've seen these buoys that are made just of something that someone put it
Right.
in the trash.
Like in the marine, like a marine buoy, like
Yes.
the that's what we have, right? So
Yes,
basically,
or these plastic barrels or metallic barrels
right,
where they have
the same.
oils, right? So
Yeah,
you
the
pick a
same.
couple of those.
Exactly the same. Yeah,
Okay, in the 80s, the industry that you saw today with this fancy infrastructure was basically those barrels with some pieces of wood, a laminar flow, whatever you find, you connect four of those, you put a net in the water with
exactly the
some
same. Yeah.
rocks at the bottom, so stretch the net and you throw the fish inside and you see what happened. And since it worked, okay, they started selling that and then they saw that they could make a lot of money, so they started, advancing the infrastructure, and all of a sudden now we have an industry and we have specialized vessels and everything. But we also have a lot of these small fishing vessels that are now transformed into support for the aquaculture industry. And that transition took here 20 years.
Okay.
So there is nothing wrong with producing fish with barrels and bamboo, because if the money is there, the industry is gonna grow. And you in
Right.
Asia, being so close to China, to Japan, to Vietnam, I mean, you have a huge advantage because the fish here in Chile, it has to be really cheap to produce. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense because a lot of your money goes into the flight that takes the fish from here to
Yeah.
China.
Right.
But if you have a short distance, you have a huge advantage over us. That's why Australia is pushing for the development, Australia and New Zealand, for the development of their aquaculture industry, because they know that if they do it right, they have the advantage to send that to China in a couple of hours instead of in our case, it's going to take us a couple of days.
Right. So also, whenever we have those kind of traditional, more traditional cages, usually the local fishermen would be the one who build it and
Yeah.
also operate it. Do you see any shift in Chile, for example, from more grassroots based production to a more industrialized production? Do you see any, a more negative or a more positive development in terms of that side of the industry?
Okay, no, it's definitely positive because here, for example, in the 90s, in 2000, we imported all the technology from Norway because they were
Oh,
the big players. So every single, underwater vehicle for inspection, every single system for the food, for the distribution of food, cameras, sensors in the water, everything was imported from Norway because they were the big players. But since 2010, the government put a lot of money here in Chile, and now the companies have developed their own technologies. So now we have companies here who make ROVs for aquaculture in Chile with, higher power so they can work on the stronger currents. We have a lot of monitoring system. The load cell that I showed you is just a load cell adapted from, we bought it in the US in Futec, but the whole encase and the whole connection system, all the electronics of that was made here in Chile. So the industry has driven a lot of new developments, a lot of new technologies, and now companies here in Chile are sending technology, are selling technology to Norway, to Colombia, to other places when they have aquaculture. So it's a big driver of technology.
So basically, from what I understand, is that the when we're imagining a cake, like the cake is not finite, right? Like it actually created a larger cake for
Yeah.
everyone to get in, because it created a new sector of economy of industry, like the support vessels and the inspection and everything, which again created a new economic opportunity, right? So
Yeah,
that's a really interesting way of seeing, looking at it. So
yeah.
I think, thank you so much for your great presentation, great answer. I think anybody else have one last questions that you want to ask directly to Cristian? You can raise your hand probably. Nope. Okay. Oh, Cristian, just a quick question on your presentation on the globally installed finfish production capacity. So what I'm just wondering what happened on 2010 or so, like sorry, 2018, 2019, because it slightly dipped and then it goes up again. Like
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Um, I don't remember what exactly happened there. It was something with the economy, actually.
Oh, is it? It's not. It's not. It's not COVID, is it? COVID is 2021,
No,
is it?
COVID is after that.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I don't remember what exactly happened.
But it's not related to new regulation or new.
No. It was something with the global economy, I guess. It was when we started looking at the oil and gas prices and something like that. Because since the industry uses a lot of generation by oil and gas,
Right.
that in those years, I think was where we have
Oh,
higher prices.
yeah. I remember. 2018, I think. 2018.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So that was the issue. So this
Oh,
is
yeah. You're right.
it's a fun,
So it's
yeah,
related to.
it's a fun way
Okay.
to see the economy. You know what happened? Man, we use a lot of oil.
To oil price.
Yes,
Understand.
that's
Okay.
it.
Okay, one last question from me, a more technical question. So this is related to our research as well on the floating PV. So we see a lot of when you mentioned deformation actually is something that we want from a large structures undergo a lot of if it's gonna be there, and then it's very the deformation doesn't have anything to do with the operation or whatnot. We want that because it's actually reduce the stresses that occurs on the structures itself. So do you see any in the design process, because it's very how because it's very engineering intensive and everything, do you see any difficulties in the industry to adopt the calculation process that consider hydroelasticity effect, not only the rigid RAO or motion?
Okay, it's that in the research we can take all the time that we want to
Right.
actually study things, but at the end of the day, we have to come out with some simple formula that can go into
I totally agree.
regulation, into
Yes.
a code or something, so the industry can actually see the value of what we are doing. But it's definitely something worth to look at because there is no simple answer. When you have something flexible in the water, that's when things are starting to get really interesting. Particularly when you have something light into the water, because if you
Right.
have something heavy in the water, it's easy. But when you
The
have something
inertia will take over, right? If it's heavy.
right, but here you have to play with the actual stiffness of the Moody lines, and probably if you have a higher stiffness, you're not going to have the deformation that you need, and you're going to have fatigue problems in the connection points, which we have seen here in the platforms. So the only way that we have been working with that is measurements, local measurements. And now we are in the process with a company to trying to monitor the stress on the connection and the pin and the points. So we are going to try to count the cycles of rotation in the interconnection that we have and compare that with the numerical simulation that we're doing and trying to improve our numerical simulations. But it's definitely something really, really challenging. I mean, it's not simple at all. But the good thing here is that the companies realize that it's worthwhile because they have a lot of problems with fatigue. Because when you have something that deforms the whole day, it's gonna create fatigue at some point. And even though the calculations you do it with the worst conditions, that maximal load, it doesn't mean anything. That's why things don't failure. We don't have these, massive failures, but we do see cracks every single day, and we have to do replacements of a small parts because of fatigue. And now we're tackling that. I don't know there, but for example, in my studies and as an undergrad, as a grad student, I never took a class on fatigue.
Yeah.
And it's something that I wish I had done it because the 90% of problems that companies ask me
Right.
at the end of the day, I said, this is a fatigue problem where you have to do the rainflow count and you need a ton of environmental data. And I go with a mechanic guy and he said, yeah, but do you have 50 years of wave information? No, I don't.
Right.
Well, I cannot do anything. And you go to oil and gas and those guys have the data, but we don't.
Right.
So I think it's similar to what happened to you, right?
Yeah. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
So
So it's complicated, but it's fun because it gives you an idea for future research too. There are some methods based on frequency domain analysis, but again, they are so limited. So I haven't the final answer for me is always the same. You want to see how your system behaves, just try to install some sensors
take a
and
lot of data. Yeah.
backtrack engineering and see what happens.
Totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Christian, very interesting discussion. Very, very interesting presentation as well. I
Thank
think
you.
we get a lot of new information, knowledge, and all of the students hear it first from the experts here. So I think it will be very, very useful for them in the future. And I hope to all the students, you can find again Christian on LinkedIn or whenever you read more about his research again. And I hope we can meet again in the near future, Christian.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going
Again,
to be
thank you
in
very
Canada for the Omaya.
Yeah. Okay, I hope everyone has a great time. I will close the class for today. Again, thank you very much, Christian, for taking your time today, very early in the morning. I hope you have a great day, great week, and great rest of the year.
Okay.
Again, thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much,
much.
Christian.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for the time. Bye, guys.
Yeah, bye, everyone.